Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. And as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. On today's episode, we take a closer look at the future of Ukraine peace negotiations and possible ceasefire solutions. The White House held technical discussions with Kyiv prior to further talks taking place between Russia and the US. The agenda of the conversations? Conditions for halting strikes, as well as implementing solutions to protect Ukrainian energy facilities and critical infrastructure. So, to get right into it, let's take a look at our latest report.
Saudi Arabia has become the focal point of the budding talks concerning peace in Ukraine. This is the venue at which the talks involving Ukrainian, Russian and US delegations are taking place. For Ukraine, the short-term priority is to secure the ceasefire that it had already discussed and agreed upon with Washington.
No matter what we talk about with our partners, we need to push Putin to give a real order to stop the strikes.
Despite the ceasefire proposal being put forward to the Russian side, Moscow has not ceased its drone strikes against Ukrainian residential areas. Of course, Russia had not agreed to the ceasefire, and it clearly has not been showing much goodwill in this direction either. Vladimir Putin had put forward several conditions to accept the ceasefire, such as a halt on arms deliveries to Ukraine, which observers point out are unacceptable to Kyiv. The American side, however, remains hopeful about these ongoing talks.
I think that you're going to see in Saudi Arabia on Monday some real progress, particularly as it affects a Black Sea ceasefire on ships between both countries.
For now, despite the Trump administration's eagerness to achieve a peace deal, not much progress has been made. Negotiations to end any conflict are always drawn out, however. It is expected for them to last weeks, if not months, and that which the world has been seeing so far are merely overtures to the actual possible talks.
And now let's zone in on the East-splaining portion of our show. The negotiations in Saudi Arabia are but a part of the string of talks that have been taking place in regard to ending the war in Ukraine. Between other meetings and phone calls, here are some of the previous attempts at finding some sort of common ground.
Talks to end the war in Ukraine go as far back as the conflict's very beginning. In the first days of the war, Belarus hosted talks between Ukrainian and Russian representatives. These lasted for several days, but led to no concrete deal. In March of 2022, Turkey played the role of mediator in another series of more high-profile meetings between the two sides to end the war. While some draft agreements had reportedly been written up, they also did not amount to anything finalized. Following this period, not many attempts to negotiate an end to the war took place. A serious renewal of negotiations only came to pass in the wake of Donald Trump's election victory in late 2024. Following his return to office in January 2025, Trump had personally met with Volodymyr Zelensky and spoken with Vladimir Putin via telephone call. US delegations have also met with Russian and Ukrainian counterparts in person separately, though a trilateral meeting has not taken place as of yet.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. Once again, the world watches as high-stakes diplomacy unfolds in the Middle East. On the 23rd of March, Ukrainian officials met with a US technical team in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, ahead of separate discussions involving both Ukraine and Russia the following day. President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the meeting, marking another step in the ongoing efforts to navigate the complexities of war and diplomacy. The US is employing what some call shuttle diplomacy, a strategic approach where negotiators engage separately with both Ukrainian and Russian representatives. The meeting held on the 23rd of March served as a preparatory discussion, laying the groundwork for the more significant talks on the 24th of March. If progress is made with Russia, there would be a possibility of further US-Ukraine discussions on the same day. Now, the tricky bit is that as we're recording this program, the talks with the Russians haven't finished yet. So some of what we're saying right now is conjecture. Leading the Ukrainian delegation are Defense Minister Rustem Umerov and Colonel Pavlo Palisa, deputy head of the Ukrainian president's office, key figures in previous US-Ukraine negotiations. Their presence signals continuity and commitment to exploring diplomatic solutions. But one thing remains clear: Ukraine refuses to engage directly with Russian representatives in Riyadh. Zelensky has stated that these meetings will focus on fleshing out technical details of a potential partial ceasefire with Russia. Yet the road ahead remains uncertain. So, will these discussions pave the way for meaningful de-escalation? Or will they be another chapter in the long and painful struggle for peace? the world waits, hoping that diplomacy prevails over war. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Milan Lelich, political analyst at RBC-UKRAINE. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So the ceasefire talks between the US and Russia are ongoing at this stage, and quite possibly when we finish our conversation and once this program is aired, they might have already finished by then, but they have not finished now. So there is some conjecture as to what we're going to be talking about, but what are your expectations? And are there any signals as to what could be achieved later today?
Well, obviously, the most possible outcome will be that there will be perhaps some arrangements achieved there in Saudi Arabia in this diplomacy, multi-level and multi-stage diplomacy, as the Americans first they talk with our delegation, then with the Russians, then with our delegation again, maybe another round of contacts between the Americans and the Russians will be there. So I think that some, partial agreement perhaps may be received and agreed to there in Saudi Arabia. But as of now, we almost have no official information, and moreover, there are almost no leaks, neither in our media, and I'm also trying to get some info from over there, but as of now, unfortunately, haven't received any significant info. But also the top Western media outlets, they also cannot boast of having a lot of details and specific about what's going on, what may be or should be or will be agreed to. Only just very, very brief official statements that the talks are very constructive and productive, and we are moving forward with a peace deal under the leadership of President Donald Trump.
Of course, these are the predictable platitudes that you're likely to hear ahead of any specifics being agreed upon. But there have been indications, for example, that a cessation of hostilities on the Black Sea could be the subject of today's talks. Do you think that this is going to change the situation in a significant way, if it is agreed?
Well, basically, this is, one can easily follow that last months there are not so many hostilities in the Black Sea at all, because the Russians have seemingly evacuated all their everything that remains of their Black Sea fleet to Novorossiysk, to there, quite far away from our capabilities, missile capabilities, so that we cannot destroy their fleet more and more as we used to do it when it was situated and located in Crimea. And as of now, there are not so many hostilities, so this will be quite interesting to see what do they agree of. And by the way, there are some sort of strange comments, for example, by President Trump's national security advisor Mike Waltz, as he said that there is already an energetical ceasefire, and that ceasefire was reached after that famous or infamous phone call between President Trump and Putin last week, and that this is his first point, and his second point that he made, I guess yesterday, he said that we should find some ways to deblocade the trade via the Black Sea, the grain trade and so on. But the trade via Black Sea is already on. It's ongoing for many months and even years. So, both of these talking points, they were debated here in Ukraine, and perhaps no one understood what National Security Advisor Waltz talked about, because we do not, here living in Ukraine, we do not notice any signals of any sort of ceasefire or everything, neither in air or on the ground or wherever.
Well, it's very unusual, isn't it? I mean, Russia has announced, following the talks that you've mentioned, that it is going to implement a ceasefire, and then it attacked energy infrastructure in 2 Ukrainian cities, I think. I'm not exactly sure if it was in Kherson. What matters really is that they showed that they are not really that determined to comply with the terms of that ceasefire. Now, You've mentioned the Black Sea. There are hardly any hostilities there right now. Would such an agreement once again be favorable to the Russians? Because this is what some people said following the agreement on the cessation of long-range strikes against energy infrastructure, that right now it is Russia that might benefit from this because Ukraine has been growing more and more efficient at taking out Russian refineries and other facilities of this kind, including using the latest type of missile, the extended range version of the Neptune. Do you think that this is once again a situation whereby Russia would be the greater of the two beneficiaries of a potential ceasefire here?
Well, it's a very hotly debated topic here in Ukraine between the experts who will benefit more of this potential, for example, energy infrastructure ceasefire, either we or the aggressors. And there are different views on that because many people say that yes, despite the very vivid increasing of our capabilities and long-range missiles, long-range drones, that almost every night or every morning we have a new information about this or that refinery or some another big industrial object being blown up or on fire after our attack. But we also, are attacked our infrastructure. For example, our gas infrastructure was really severely attacked by the Russians in the course of some next weeks. And we really expect some big troubles with the gas. And in the next heating season, I mean, this autumn, this winter moving into 2026, that if nothing is done with that, we're gonna have really big troubles. This is clear that we have already started buying a lot of new gas from the European Union, and it will definitely be the case closer to the next heating season that Ukraine perhaps also needs some sort of this pause. This is what about
a breathing room, essentially. That's a very good point there. Now, we're going to move on to one important issue. Steve Witkoff's interview with Tucker Carlson, because this has been pretty much the talk of the town during this week. Very unusual things, very unorthodox things being said during that interview. What is your take on that, really? And how does it actually... what does it say about the stance that the US administration might be taking here? It's not the first time we're getting these unusual signals, but, I mean, this man is technically one of the top negotiators, especially after Keith Kellogg was apparently sidelined. And he says that this is about the Russian speakers. This narrative sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, because, apart from the Russians themselves, really almost no one really considered these so-called referendums on the parts of the occupied, some of the occupied Ukrainian oblasts, to have at least something with the democracy. For example, I don't know, like Alexander Lukashenko, the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, he also did not very, very much emphasize the importance of those referendums.
They were held at gunpoint, essentially, weren't they? There were armed troops at polling stations.
Yeah, and now we hear all this stuff not from the anchors or guests at the Russian TV channels, but from a special envoy of the President of the United States of America, really speculating on the issues of Russian language and the referendum and the desire of those people to join Russia instead of stay in Ukraine, which is completely absurd. I think that it lies in line with some talking points that we heard from President Trump during that infamous shouting match in the Oval Office between him and our President Zelensky, when President Trump has said that, if you call him, Putin, if you call him like an aggressor, a war criminal, and everything, you will never make a deal with him. But you have to make a deal. But this does not mean that he is not a war criminal and aggressor and all this stuff. But I think that perhaps this is like a more global approach taken by the White House administration and all the team, that we should not try to irritate Russians with something, like call them aggressors or everything, because they will, I don't know, like they will quit the ongoing negotiations and all the stuff. Instead, we should say something that they will highly appreciate, and maybe this will push push them and eventually push the whole negotiation process to their successful end, and we will have that big deal that President Trump always talks about. So I think these may be just, I don't know, the stereotypes or the prejudices of Mr. Witkoff as well. Perhaps he has some Russian friends or Russian-speaking friends or friends from Russian Federation who live here and there, and maybe they are his source of information about, the Russian language regions and the referendums and all this absolutely insane stuff.
Highly disturbing, isn't it? Now, one final thing, because this is something that was essentially brought up at one point by President Donald Trump. Later on, we didn't really have too many discussions about this. The ownership of nuclear power plants. Now, I'm assuming this was mostly intended to be about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which was illegally occupied by the Russians and now poses a security threat. I mean, they had the personnel working there, again, at gunpoint, disregarding safety regulations, storing military equipment at this power plant. So what would you say about this idea of the US essentially taking it over? So none of the warring sides would own this power plant, it would be under US control. Highly controversial, again, but could this perhaps be an option to ensure the security of this facility?
Well, I think that this general approach that, if you have something American here and there, some real estate or some enterprises, some plants, factories, or some mining facilities, I mean, this mineral deal, that if it is under the American ownership, no one will ever dare to attack or do something. I don't think that this approach really works, because even before 2014, we had different American businesses operating here. Before 22nd invasion, a full-scale invasion, we also had a lot of American business companies running here. It has never been some sort of a factor.
Were they strategic companies? Just a quick question. Were they strategic in nature, companies in which the US administration had a direct interest?
Well, if we talk about this power plant, this is also we should understand that this is still the property of Ukrainian nation and Ukrainian people. So we understand perhaps President Trump would happily seize not only our power plants, but also our gas stations and refineries and whatever else to put it under the American ownership, and then to say his citizens, how much new wealth we have. Like this, but I don't think that this is a reasonable approach to peace negotiations and all this stuff. Okay, some U.S. control may be there in this or that form, but I don't understand how the U.S. ownership over this or that object may be a real deterrence factor.
Well, it's highly unorthodox, and also it seems that the questions of international legal order are getting lost in translation at this stage in the talks between Russia and the US. Milan Lelich was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern Newsflash, a curated selection of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. The United States and Russia are looking to revive the Black Sea grain deal. There is a slight problem here, however, as Ukraine doesn't seem to be as reliant on its existence as it was in the past.
Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said that the negotiations surrounding a conclusion to the war in Ukraine would involve a discussion about Russia consenting to a resumption of the Black Sea grain deal. This agreement was crucial to facilitating Ukrainian grain exports via the Black Sea. It was signed in mid-2022 with Turkey and the United States acting as mediators. Moscow and Kyiv had signed separate agreements with both countries. Russia withdrew from the deal roughly a year later, saying that the West had failed to meet conditions concerning sanctions on Russian fertilizers. Since the deal's collapse, Ukraine has been able to re-establish its main grain export route through the Black Sea. Reports indicate that the export volume is exceeding pre-war figures. Observers note that in this situation, Kyiv might not be as keen to renew the grain deal in exchange for concessions to Russia as it could have been in the past.
The United States has reportedly been floating the idea of establishing its presence at Ukrainian nuclear power plants. President Zelensky says that he discussed the possibility of U.S. assistance in restoring the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant during his recent phone call with Donald Trump.
The Ukrainian president has gone on record to say that deoccupying the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant wouldn't be enough, as the infrastructure currently present there is insufficient. This statement was part of the phone call he held with US President Donald Trump, during which Trump reportedly told Zelensky that US ownership of Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants would be the best way to protect such infrastructure from Russian attacks. Some experts have said that this could be a strong security guarantee for Ukraine and could help Ukraine's nuclear power shift from Russia to the West. They cautioned, however, that Kyiv should still put forward certain conditions, such as the country's state-owned nuclear power company remaining the plant's sole operator. The issue of protecting Ukrainian energy comes as Washington and Kyiv have been negotiating a deal which gives the US significant stakes in Ukraine's mineral extraction revenue.
Hungary said it will continue to oppose Ukraine's EU accession over Kyiv's alleged violation of the rights of the Hungarian minority living in the country. Hungary's foreign minister says that Ukraine has failed to restore the group's minority rights that were stripped back in 2015.
Ukraine and Hungary continue to be at odds, this time despite concerning Kyiv's aspirations to join the European Union. Budapest is against the country joining the bloc and has cited Ukraine's alleged ongoing violations of the rights of the Hungarian minority living in Ukraine's Transcarpathia region. The Hungarian foreign minister says that despite reassuring Budapest repeatedly that it will do so, it has not restored various minority rights to the group. He called the situation totally contrary to shared European values and norms. The issue has been a long-standing bone of contention between the two countries. Hungary has often criticized Ukraine for its educational and language laws, which it says disadvantage ethnic Hungarians living in the country. Ukraine was given EU candidate status in 2022, but has faced many hurdles to advance in its application. While Brussels says that the country has made progress, further accession talks have to be approved unanimously by all member states.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Bye for now.